Hi and welcome to A World of Words. I'm Vanessa and today I'm going to talk about writing a quest story. So as you may or may not know, I am currently brainstorming a series. This is the second series and I'm currently working on my outline for the second book in my second series. And this is a fantasy series and I'm not going to go into too many plot details. I will talk a lot more in depth about my stories when, because I'm being optimistic here, when they are published. Just because I want to keep some of the mystery and I don't want to give too much away before books are even out. Because books are always more fun, I feel, when you go into them as blind as possible. So I like to talk about my writing endeavors in more vague terms. So basically, for this sequel, I am going to have two separate quests. I love writing quests. They are so much fun. The first book in this series also had a quest. So I'm making this one different from that one. There are so many varieties you can do on a quest. I feel like they're personally one of my favorite things to read, so I also naturally enjoy writing about them. But this book, particularly, is going to have two quests with two sets of characters. At one point in the plot, I do want the two sets of characters to overlap in their quests. Yeah, so it's gonna be fun in that way. These are characters who they all know each other from the first book, so it's kind of a little mini reunion partway through the book as well. My struggle is, one, what should I have happen on these quests? I have like a theme that I want to go for. Like I have a very vague idea for some things I want to happen within like character development wise and stuff on the quest. I want them to both be very different, but I also want them to complement each other. So basically it's not just like two random plot lines. I want it to, each one adds a little bit to the other storyline, if that makes sense. Even though they do overlap at one point, they are for the majority of the time separate. I don't know if I've like dug myself into a hole with this idea, if it's too complicated to do, but I want to be able to pull it off and I feel like I can pull it off. I just need to figure out, because I don't have that many specifics, so I'm floating around with like, possibilities are literally endless. Like it's a magical world, it's a medieval world, it has magical creatures, it has magical spells, so I could do almost anything that I want on these quests. I could have pretty much anything happen, and while that is good, I don't have that many limitations on my story. It's also kind of like, okay, literally anything can happen, so what should happen? Because I know like kind of like the end feeling, I guess, but as far as the journey to get there is a big giant series of question marks because, like I said, I am in the planning stages of this second, third, and fourth book because I did finally decide that it's not going to be a trilogy, it's going to be 4 books. Not just because I feel like a lot of people complain that trilogies are so overdone. I personally don't feel that way, and that's not why I decided to make it 4 books. It was honestly because when I was coming up with my plot ideas for the series, one of the plot ideas I decided I really liked is something I could expand into its own book. And it just like turned out when I was coming up with the ideas that the ideas, I have enough for 4 books, and I think 4 books would be really good for this series. Especially because my first series I have is very long. My original plan was 6 to 8 books. But my outlines for the first couple books ended up being so long that those first 2 books could potentially be split in this other series that is actually related to this series, but it's basically my other series is very long, and so I feel like 4 books is a good solid length for this series. Plus I don't know if I should say, but why not? You'll be able to tell by the end of the series anyway. This particular series I'm working on will have a sequel series. There's something that connects all of my books together. So this particular series is a companion to my first series, but you don't have to read the first series. I think I've said this before, but the sequel series, I feel like I do want to have more crossovers in the sequel series with characters from my other series. I want potentially them to meet characters from my other series. So there will be more crossovers, kind of like the Marvel Universe, how, you know, there are lots of crossovers and crazy stuff like that happening. That's kind of what I'm aiming for with the sequel series to the series. But this first series, while there are characters that do appear in other books, you don't necessarily, it's kind of like Six of Crows and the Grisha trilogy, where you don't have to have read it and they won't spoil each other, really. Like, you learn things, but it's not really a spoiler, I don't think. Back to the second series. It's going to be 4 books. Basically, I had the second book, which is the one I'm outlining right now. I have this 2 quests to basically plot out. Pretty much struggling with figuring out what should happen because so much can happen on a quest. And I don't want to copy another book that I've read. So like Lord of the Rings is a big quest story. And my books aren't really like Lord of the Rings. It's this particular magical world. I have other magical worlds that do have elves in it, and probably dwarves. I haven't decided. This particular magical world is a magical world. There are wizards, but there are not elves. There are people with magic, but there aren't actually elves. Anyway, it's nothing like Lord of the Rings. There are no magical rings, there's no Gollum, I was gonna say there's no Sauron, but there's no Sauron exactly. Sauron. Yeah, but there is going to have to be a magical adversary? Villain, essentially. There is a villain that has magic powers. Just because there has to be a villain that has magic powers, because my main character in this story, or main characters, since it is about sisters, and while the sisters are not me and my sister, the relationship is based on me and my sister. I've made a bunch of changes to the characters because originally there were quite a few similarities. Like, I did originally write them as me and my sister in the very, very first beginning stages. They had our names and they were pretty much us. But I've changed it now so that the characters are not exactly us, but their love for each other and their fun friendship relationship is based on me and my sister. So that's really fun to write about because I feel like there aren't nearly enough siblings in books that get along and are actually like buddies and friends and have a lot of fun together. And so my characters do, even though I made a bunch of changes to them so that they are not us. So if you read my main character, you might see a few similar, like for instance, she loves reading about fantasy, which obviously is me. She's not me, if that makes any sense. You'll see. But I'm getting off track again. Writing about quests. There are so many options to have. You can have like any sort of creature attack. You can have them go into any sort of weird place. And also these books are comedies. I would say they're comedies because there's a lot of funny parts and the main purpose of them is to entertain. So I don't want to say they're like Rick Riordan because Rick Riordan's just so hilarious. But they do have a certain wackiness to them. So like the first quest in the first book was pretty wacky and hilarious, if I do say so myself. It's just like, it's a book that has its serious moments and it definitely has its danger and the characters go through stuff, but it's really fun to write because it's very wacky and a lot of crazy things happen, but the characters are aware that they're crazy and insane, so they're like commenting on it like, oh my god, what's going on, this is so weird. So it's kind of a self-aware kind of wackiness, which I like to have in all of my books because that's kind of my favorite thing to read, is when characters are like aware of tropes and things like that. It's not like a fantasy series where no one has ever read a fantasy book before. I try to make my characters like aware of their situations, if that makes sense, but not so aware that it's like satire, because it's not actual satire. It's just like a comedy of its genre. While satire can be a lot of fun sometimes, I feel like a lot of times it goes over the edge and makes it so that you can't take it seriously because it is a satire. But my books, I want you to be able to take them seriously, but you also laugh and enjoy yourself while reading them. I feel like I've gone away from my original theme of this vlog chat thing. That tends to happen a lot though. I plan for it to be all based on a theme, and then I just start rambling, and I don't even know like half of what I've been talking about until I go back and edit it, and I'm just like... But yes, back to writing about quests, which I'm sorry if this video is no longer about writing about quests, because I feel like it's not anymore, and I was hoping, while discussing it, I would somehow have some sort of breakthrough and figure out what to do about my quest for a good quest story. But instead I've just rambled about something else, and it's not... Who knows? Hopefully this was interesting. I feel like the video's gotten long enough to the point where if I don't stop talking it's just gonna go on forever, and I'm still not going to have figured out exactly what to do about my quest stories that I've put very high expectations for myself for these stories. I've tried taking a break. I even went and did an art project yesterday. I made some magnetic bookmarks. If you have any advice for writing a quest story, you can feel free to leave it below. I know how to write a quest story, it's just like figuring out the details, which is the most annoying part because no one else can tell me what to put in my book. No one should give me their ideas because it should be my ideas. So I'm just gonna work through it. I always manage to work through it, which is just something I have to tell myself. I will figure it out. It might take a few days, but I will figure it out. That's probably what I'm going to do after I finish filming this video. I will get back to work and figure out what should happen on these quests. And maybe in a future vlog I can tell you that I did it and that it's all planned out and ready to go, but we shall see. Here's hoping that happens. Please let me know anything you want to share about your current writing problems, triumphs even, if you have good news, if you worked through something that you were struggling with. That's awesome. Please share below. That is very inspirational. I would just love to chat with you about writing or anything else you want to chat about in the comments below, so please leave a comment. I always respond to comments. I love responding to comments. And give this video a thumbs up if it was entertaining in some way. I have no idea if it was, but if it was, please hit that like button. And I upload new videos on Mondays and every other Friday, plus the occasional surprise video. Please subscribe if you want to see more of my videos. Have fun and stay creative. Bye!